Hello, our topic today is extensions. Extensions, as you probably know, are something that's just unavoidable in cello technique. The fact that we can only stretch a third as it is, we need that extra half step to be able to do both a minor third and a major third. So in case you don't know, what an extension is the idea of instead of having one half step each between adjacent fingers, we're going to put an extra half step between at least one of the pairs of fingers, usually just one pair of fingers, and usually between 1 and 2. Just a kind of disclaimer or a caveat early on, if these are extremely difficult for you, you want to consider the possibility that your cello is too big for you, move to a smaller cello. It's really quite taxing with certain body shapes and hand sizes to do them on too large an instrument. And likewise, if the strings are much too high above the fingerboard, that's something that a luthier can correct, but that also makes extensions much more difficult than they need to be. Two things to keep in mind. All right, so like I said, the idea of extension, we're going to add an extra half step between a couple of the fingers. And before we even get started, this is something to keep in mind, not just for this video, but for so many of these and so much of the stuff that you'll work on cello, is the idea of being mobile and being flexible, being supple. So here I'm referring to the elbow needs to be willing to move up or down in height and also forward and backwards. The thumb, as a result, needs to be willing to change where it's contacting the back of the neck. The wrist needs to be able to rotate, usually towards you, what we call pronation. So if your muscles are inflexible or rigid about any of these things, that's not going to set you up for success. Inflexibility is always the enemy. All right, so we'll start with backward extensions. Always we want to start with backward extensions, where all we're doing is reaching back with the tip of first finger. And you can see a couple things as I demonstrate this. You can see I'm exaggerating a little bit, but showing that, trying to model the mobility of the elbow and also of the wrist in accomplishing this. You may also notice that I end up much more on the side of first finger than on the tip of it. I have much more callus on the side of my first finger as a result of all the times that I'm playing in extended positions, rather than try to make it this. So if I don't pronate, that's all the further I can stretch if I leave my hand just in the same plane. Whereas if I roll my wrist, I don't need to extend that far, fortunately. That's easily 3 extra half steps more than what I need. So just a little pronation goes a long way, and it ends up with you playing on the side of first finger. If you keep trying to play on the tip, you'll end up extending part of the way and then losing all the distance that you gained with the extension by trying to bend your finger back the other way. Do you see? This loses me all the distance that I otherwise was going to gain, or a lot of it. Whereas this allows me to get a lot of distance between first and second finger. So we will put that extra space between first and second finger, not between third and fourth. 9 times out of 10, we're going to put that extra space here between our 2 strongest and most independent fingers, 1 and 2, not between our 2 weakest and least independent fingers. So this requires some thinking ahead on your part sometimes in order to think, oh, if I'm going to need a high 4, then I'm going to use a 2, not a 3. After a while, that extra half step between 3 and 4 certainly doesn't feel as comfortable as what that extra half step between 1 and 2 can feel in a short amount of time. Backwards extensions like this, we will test them by listening to them. So for example, when we call it either closed position or regular position, where I only have a half step between adjacent fingers, that gives me a minor third, 3 half steps, 1, 2, 3 half steps. So you just play some songs that have a minor third in them to get it in your ear. And then for the major third, very different sound from the minor third. So the first finger will feel like it's hopping over this invisible fret here in order to get to an entirely new fret. Not just a little bit lower, but an entire fret lower. Once you start getting comfortable with that, you should try transferring it into other positions. So to play A to F sharp versus A to F natural. In third position, versus I don't need to extend nearly as far in fourth position. That's not that far of an extension because, as we know, you look at the frets again on a guitar and see how much closer they get together as you get closer to the bridge. Same thing on a fingerboard. Of course, we just can't see where those pitches are. So that's one reason to move around where you're doing your extensions. The other reason is that you will find that you have to adjust your elbow and your wrist and your thumb a little bit, or maybe a lot, in order to make each of those positions comfortable. So while you're getting used to the concept, you might as well get used to the feeling all through at least the neck positions. Next video, we'll tackle forward extensions.